thought I'd put together a series of videos on my workflow. Most of it is actually based around Lightroom, and I use Lightroom for importing my images, organizing them, even down to the website I use is based around, it has a Lightroom plugin. So it's basically my hub for everything. It's one place I can go to and absolutely everything is organized through it. So the first thing I'll go through is importing. Importing is the most important part of Lightroom, because if you're not importing correctly, it can be very hard to find images. You might end up with, I've seen catalogs where the whole thing is just named by date. So you can imagine how hard it can be to search through files by date. So by default, Lightroom should, when you're on the library module here, Lightroom should, when you insert a card, the import dialog should pop up. But this could be just since the last CC update. Mine doesn't work. But if that doesn't, you have your import button is just down at the bottom left here. So once you click that, you're going to get this dialog will pop up. Now, the easiest way to think about this is on the left hand side here is your input, and on the right hand side is your output. So you've got the photos that are coming in and where you want to save them to. Now, before I get into any more of that, you have a few options across here. If you're using CC and possibly from 5 and before, the move and add will be grayed out if you're using a memory card or a memory stick. Thankfully, that's a little safety feature they've built in, that these used to cause some problems, especially the add one, because what used to happen was if you had add selected by mistake, you could easily plug in your card, import them into Lightroom, and if add was selected, all that happens is it just tells Lightroom that the photos are in this location. It doesn't copy them, it doesn't move them, they stay on your card, they're not actually on your computer. So while you're working on them there, it looks like everything's imported, it looks like it's all good to go, but actually the photos don't exist on your hard drive. So what happens is you pull that card out, put it back in your camera and format it, and the images are gone. So thankfully it detects if it's a memory card now and it doesn't let you use these. So the two options you have here is copy as DNG and copy. If you haven't come across DNG before, it's basically Adobe's version of a RAW file. So it's kind of a universal format within Adobe that all their programs will take DNG files. There are some others that do, there are some other programs that don't. So if you plan on, well, you're not really going to plan, but if you think you might ever use any other editor other than Lightroom, the likes of the biggest competitor to Lightroom is Capture One. The only thing with Capture One, it doesn't accept DNG files. So if you convert all your files to DNG, you can't edit them in other programs unless they accept the DNG format. So I used to use this option, not because DNG is better, it's only because the files can be between 10 and 20% smaller. So I used to use this back when I was on Lightroom 2, and that was mainly due to, at that stage, hard drives were still fairly expensive, and I wanted to keep my file sizes down. So it was a way of keeping them down and not having to buy extra drives. Because you can imagine like 20% saving on a 1 terabyte drive, you're going to get an awful lot of extra photos on it. But I use the copy option now because I like to just send the raw files straight in. Mainly because the copy as DNG takes about twice the time to import because it has to convert the file as well. So I just use copy. Then I have, over on my left hand side, you have your source. The next option here you'll see eject after import. You won't really notice this too much if you're using Windows and pulling out your card, but if you're on a Mac, it's nice to have that option ticked, because if you forget to eject the card and pull it out, you don't want that notification warning coming up. So it's good to have this, that when it's finished the import, it'll automatically eject your card so you can plug it out. On the devices, what can happen is, you'll see here it says no photos found. The photos are actually on the memory card. It's just Lightroom isn't looking inside the subfolders that your camera makes on the card. So what you need to do sometimes, if the option up here doesn't have it, is if you click down here, just in there, you see now you've got include subfolders up here as well. Once you tap that, you get this message. So you can click on that box and the pop-up won't happen again, and it will always include the subfolders by default. So what happens here now is you can see all the photos that are on my card. One thing that you can do here, I tend not to do it. I like to import the photos and look through them first. But if there's any photos that you know you definitely don't want to import, like this, there's a lot of photos, and this would be test exposures if I'm doing any long exposures or bits and pieces, and that's probably one where I forgot to put the big stopper in and took an exposure. Any of those, you can just click on that checkbox and it won't import them, so you don't have to delete them later on, unless it's something that's really blown out like that or completely dark, say this. Although you'd be surprised what you can actually pull back from a file like this. You can uncheck it there. Most of the time I don't do it, I'll do it after importing. These are dark for a reason. They're a stack of HDR exposures. So there's a couple of other things you can do in here. You see there's options for check all, uncheck all. You got grid and loop views. That's just, grid is what you see here, and loop is if you want to see a single photo. Instead of clicking down here, you can also just double click on any photo and it'll show you the loop view. And if you tap G, it will go back to grid, or you can click down here. There's a sort option as well. If you shoot with two cameras, the sort option can be very handy as long as you've got the date and time set right on the two cameras. You can sort by capture time, file name, or media type if you're doing video and photo work. These are off one camera, so they're just going to come in order anyway. The other option then is down here you've got thumbnails. You can change the size of the thumbnails as you like. I kind of like them around that size, but it's all down to preference. Just over on the right hand side you'll see this is the output. It's where you're going to save your files to. The very first option is build previews. By default, Lightroom will actually be set on minimal. The downside of that, if you're already using Lightroom and you haven't switched this, you might find as you're flicking through your shots, if you're trying to rate them, or if you're trying to zoom in to the 1:1 or 100% view to check for sharpness or do any sort of editing, you might find just down here on the loop when you're looking at the photo, there'll be a loading box that comes up there. And that wait time can slow you down if you're trying to flick through a lot of photos really fast. By using the 1:1 preview, it takes a little bit longer after the import because it has to generate a full preview for each file. But that bit of time that you'll have added on will save you when you're flicking through. It makes your editing much faster. So I like to have that one turned on. The downside is it does take up a bit more hard drive space. But by default with Lightroom, after 30 days, if you haven't used the 1:1 preview off your files, it will actually delete them for you. So you can make them now. If you don't use them, it just gets rid of them. The next option, and that's only if you're using external drives to store your files. So it's a very handy way that you can edit on the go without having your hard drive connected. I have all my files on an external drive, so I use this so I can edit without having to plug the drive in. It can make Lightroom a bit faster for editing, although they've now introduced it that it will use the smart previews in the preferences in the latest update. But it also saves on battery life if you're using a laptop, because if I'm out on the go editing away, it actually uses quite a bit of power to plug in and power an extra hard drive, so it saves me a bit of battery and I can edit without having the hard drive plugged in. The don't import duplicates option is one of the best things in the import module, because if you're like me, you might go out shooting, come back, upload the photos into Lightroom, put the card back in the camera and forget to format it. So next time you go out shooting, you come back and all the other photos are still on there. So with this option checked, anything that's already imported into Lightroom, it won't let you bring it in again. The other options here, you've got make a second copy. I don't use that. I use software to do my backups for me. Add to collection, file rename, and a lot of these I don't actually use on the import. One thing you do want to make sure is that down here in your develop settings, you want to make sure that's set to none, because if you use any of the presets that come with Lightroom or make your own, what will happen is you can click on these presets and decide I want an antique tone, and you might notice Lightroom remembers these things, and next time you import it's going to apply that to all the photos, which can be a bit of a pain to go back and take it off. Just make sure that's on none. The metadata, if you have metadata set up, I'll do another video on how to set up metadata, but if you have metadata set up, you can select that here, and it just means it'll put your details and copyright information onto your photos as you import them. Keywords, if you like to keyword everything, you can do it here. I tend not to do it too much. I know I should. Lightroom is great for organizing, but I tend to only really keyword the photos I upload to the website. But if you were to do it in here, the one thing you want to make sure is all of those photos have something in common. So if I was to type in keywords here and there's something that's not in all of the photos, it's going to throw things off a bit. So any of the photos there you'll see sunrise, you've got railings, you've got rocks. They're all fairly similar to what's in them, so you could get away with using the same keywords on these. But if you had a portrait thrown in there, you couldn't really put landscape keywords on that, so I tend to do all those after. The next option down here is into subfolder. So this is where the files are actually going to save to. So down here, if you're saving them to your hard drive, it will usually select your pictures folder by default. I don't save them straight to my hard drive, I put them onto my external drive. So in here I can click on photos. You'll see my structure, the way I have everything laid out in here. And the way you can use this into subfolder to your advantage is I only have to click on the 2016 folder, come back up here. So I've told Lightroom I want the photos to go in here, but I want you to make a folder and put that folder inside 2016. So if I type in here, these photos were all taken at a place in Dublin called the 40 foot. If I put 40 foot in here, you'll see now Lightroom actually gives you a preview of where it's going to save the files. Anything that's grayed out there, it shows you the files are going to go here, and there's also going to be a folder inside that with the date on it. Now if you don't want that, I tend to visit places over and over again through the year, so I will leave the place and the date in. You can, if you want, just import into the one folder. When you click on the organize option up here, you can sort into one folder and then you'll see the other one disappears. So everything is just going to go in here. I used to use that option, but then as I found I was returning to places, it was very hard to distinguish between when I was there. So I like to have it by date now. Then as you come down, you'll see all my other folders. So here I have my file structure. I like to have it set out by year and then places or people I have shot in there or a name of a shoot. And it's just my way of organizing. Any way you like to use, anything that works for you is the best thing. The next thing then, once you've selected all that, this is your import is pretty much sorted. So just remember that you have the right device selected, you got the photo selected, and then you make sure you have copy and your output over here. Once that's all done, you can hit import. And Lightroom's going to straight away go and start making those folders. You see it down here. It's already made 40 foot with a date and it's bringing the files in. So you'll see copy and import is going to come across the top there. And as it makes its way up, Now the speed of this can depend greatly on what you're using. If you're using a card reader, a lot of the cheaper card readers tend to be a bit slower. USB 3 card readers are amazing, especially if you're using big files, because it's the card reader and it's also down to the card's read speed. So different cards will have different read speeds, and if you find it a bit slow, investing in a better card or card reader is going to help that. Then you'll see up here I have 3 operations running. So this is where it's going to start making the smart previews. If I click just on the end here, you'll see this pops up. So it's building smart previews, it's building the one-to-one previews, and it's also building search index. Now this is a default I have switched on in Lightroom. It has facial recognition, but in these there are no faces, so I can speed it up a bit by closing these off. Or you can turn it off and stop making those altogether by disabling that in the preferences. What you will see, just click back into it again, is the one-to-one previews will take a bit longer. The smart previews tend to fly up, but because the one-to-ones is making a full preview of the file and not a smaller file size, it will take a bit longer. You'll probably hear the fans coming on. It tends to be a little bit memory hungry when it's doing this, but it is a big advantage when it comes to loading your files, because if I can skip ahead here and try and get ahead of where it's actually building the previews, if I double click on this file, you can see that loading bar coming up. And it's this that when you zoom in, it's still loading, it's not giving you a full preview of the file, and you just have to wait for it to render. So that, even though it's only a couple of seconds, if you're editing a whole bunch of photos, say it could be a wedding where you have a couple of hundred to go through, you can imagine if that time is added on to every time you click on a photo, you're going to have to wait that 5 or 6 seconds. Whereas if you do it now, I like to kind of just import them, walk away, grab a cup of coffee, and generate everything in the background. And even if it's not finished, it does them in order of the film strip down here on the bottom. So as it goes through, once you go from the start and start going through and rating or flagging your photos, that's where it's going to fly ahead of you. Right now you'll see it popped up with smart previews are built. That's fine, you can hit OK. If you don't want this to pop up every time it's finished, you can click on that don't show again box. So that's it, previews are generated, it's all gone away. And you'll see now, I go to any other photo, I can click on it, I can zoom in, and because I've got that full preview, I can zoom straight in and check for sharpness without having to wait for that loading box to go away. So that's pretty much it on importing files. I'll make a few other videos on my workflow as I go through, and processing and collections and that sort of thing, and even down to the website and how I used Lightroom to upload everything straight to the website and control it from here.